She had survived 3 combat deployments, but nothing prepared her for a traffic stop just 5 blocks from home. Colonel Angela Monroe had just returned home after 9 months overseas. She wasn't wearing her formal military uniform today. No stars, no medals, just grey jogging pants, a simple army sweatshirt, and a duffel bag tossed in the back seat of a black SUV. She looked like any other woman running errands or coming home from the gym. Angela was driving the final stretch home, 5 blocks from her driveway, already thinking about the hot shower she'd take and the home-cooked meal she missed so much. Her deployment had been intense. She'd led troops under fire, negotiated under pressure, and brought her entire unit home safely. Then she saw them, red and blue lights, a siren, a police cruiser behind her. Her stomach tightened, but her hands remained calm. She knew the routine. She'd trained people on what to do at traffic stops. Pull over safely, hands on the wheel, no sudden moves. She followed everything by the book. She didn't know it yet, but her left taillight was out. That was all. The officer approached fast, too fast. His eyes scanned her car like it was a stolen vehicle. His hand hovered over his gun. Angela saw it, and every muscle in her body tensed. She'd seen that stance before, not in this country, but in combat zones. This wasn't a routine stop anymore, and in the next few moments, everything would spiral into something unthinkable. Colonel Angela Monroe sat perfectly still. Her engine was off. Both hands were visible on the steering wheel, her face calm, composed. She had been through military checkpoints in hostile countries. She had de-escalated armed rebels using only her voice. But in that moment, sitting in her car on a suburban American street, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: fear. The officer stepped up to the window, young, jittery, hands still dangerously close to his weapon. "License and registration," he barked. No greeting, no explanation, no reason given. Angela nodded slowly. "Yes, sir," she said respectfully. "My license is in my left pocket. May I—" "Don't move," he shouted. Angela froze. Her hands stayed on the wheel. Her voice remained steady. "I'm not moving," she said. "My military ID is also in my jacket. I said don't move." His voice cracked with aggression, not control. He wasn't de-escalating. He was escalating. Angela had seen this before, in soldiers who let fear drive their decisions instead of training. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was her neighborhood. She tried to calm the situation. "I just came back from deployment, sir. I live 5 blocks from here. I'm not a threat." But the officer didn't hear her words. He didn't see the steady breath, the still hands, the calm demeanor. He saw her skin, and in a flash, he made the decision that would change both their lives. He stepped back, hand flying to his holster. "No sudden moves," he yelled. "I haven't moved," Angela pleaded, her heart pounding now, louder than the cicadas in the trees or the cars passing in the distance. Then it happened. Bang! The shot rang out, echoing down the street. A neighbor screamed. Angela's body jerked, blood blossoming across her thigh. She hadn't even reached for her pocket. But she was already bleeding out. The moment the shot was fired, everything stopped. The birds, the breeze, the hum of afternoon life. Angela Monroe slumped sideways in her seat, her right shoulder hitting the door with a thud. Her fingers twitched instinctively toward the wound on her leg. Blood poured fast, too fast. Her military sweatshirt began soaking red, the same fabric that once shielded her from shrapnel, now drenched in her own blood, not from enemy fire, but from an American police officer's bullet. The officer stepped back, gun still raised, his expression flickering from aggression to confusion to something that looked almost like panic. "She was reaching," he shouted, more to himself than anyone else. "She went for something." But there was no weapon, no sudden move, no threat. Angela's voice was faint now. "Help me." Her body slumped further out the door as she fought to remain conscious. The pavement was hot against her skin. She could feel her own blood pooling beneath her, sticking her clothes to the road like glue. Sirens approached fast, backup. Neighbors had already stepped out, some with phones recording, others just frozen in disbelief. One woman gasped, "Oh my God, she didn't do anything." 2 additional squad cars pulled up. Officers rushed out. The one who shot her was already backing away, hands in his hair, pacing like he couldn't believe what just happened. She wouldn't stop moving," he muttered, almost pleading with himself. Another officer ran up, knelt beside Angela, and gently unzipped her jacket to look for ID. That's when he saw it. Dog tags, military tags. He pulled one out. "Read it." And then he said the words that made everything go silent. "Oh no, she's military. a full-bird colonel, Angela Munro. And in that moment, the street was no longer a crime scene. It became a national disgrace. The officer holding Angela's dog tags looked up, his face drained of color. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. His silence was louder than the sirens, heavier than the heat rising off the blacktop. The tag gleamed in the sunlight like a forgotten Medal of Honor, one that should have protected her. But hadn't. One of the backup officers whispered, "Wait, she's a colonel? A full-bird colonel, a rank not easily earned." Angela Munro had led hundreds, survived war zones, received commendations for valor. But here she was, bleeding on a public street from a single gunshot wound. In her own country, unarmed, 5 blocks from home. The officer who pulled the trigger took a few steps backward, his breathing shallow, his hands trembling. His gun was already holstered, but the damage was done. "I thought—" He started, but the words collapsed under their own weight. "You didn't think," a sergeant said, stepping past him, kneeling beside Angela with medical gloves. "You assumed—" Paramedics arrived and took over, cutting through Angela's pant leg, revealing the damage. The bullet had gone through the upper thigh, dangerously close to a major artery. She was fading fast. One of them pressed gauze hard against the wound, while another started and forth they moved quickly, mechanically, as if trying to race against a mistake they hadn't made, but felt responsible for anyway. Angela opened her eyes briefly, her lips dry and cracked. "My name is Colonel Munro," she whispered. "I know," the paramedic replied softly, his voice breaking. "We're going to take care of you." Camera phones were recording now. People were live streaming. The image of the officer who shot her, standing alone, his face in his hands, would be replayed millions of times over the next 48 hours. But Angela didn't know that. All she knew was that she was alive, barely, and that the world she thought she had returned to no longer felt like home. The ambulance sped through city streets, lights flashing and siren wailing, as Colonel Angela Munro faded in and out of consciousness. Her body lay strapped to the gurney, her uniform-stitched sweatshirt cut open, bandages soaked in red. The paramedic beside her held pressure to her leg, repeating her name like an anchor to keep her awake. "Stay with me, Colonel. You hear me? Stay with me." Angela had heard that tone before, on the battlefield. She'd been the one giving that order to wounded soldiers. Now it was her lying still, counting the breaths, hoping her body could survive this final mission to make it home alive. But this wasn't supposed to be combat. This was supposed to be her homecoming. Word spread fast. Within an hour, news outlets picked up the story. A black woman, shot during a routine traffic stop. At first, the headlines didn't mention her rank, just black motorist injured. But by the time she arrived at the emergency room, the truth had started to surface. U.S. Army colonel, recently returned from deployment, unarmed, shot by a police officer 5 blocks from her home. A trauma team worked on her immediately. Blood transfusions, emergency surgery. Her heart stopped once, but they brought her back, and when the lead surgeon stepped into the waiting area and whispered, "She's alive," but it was close, the room exhaled. At the police station, the shooter sat in an interrogation room, silent, ashen, a lawyer on the way. The body cam footage had already been pulled. It showed exactly what Angela said. Calm voice, no sudden movements, hands up the whole time. The video would soon go viral, but Angela hadn't said a word publicly. Not yet. Because some wounds don't just bleed, they wait, and when she finally spoke, the world would feel it. But for now, she lay in a hospital bed, her breath shallow, her thoughts racing. If I can survive war zones, she thought, why did I almost die 5 minutes from my own kitchen? As she bled out on the pavement, her tag still around her neck, the officer realized what he had done. The bullet didn't care about her medals, but now the whole world did. The video hit the internet like a lightning bolt. By midnight, it was trending on every major social platform. Millions had watched the footage from the officer's body cam. Angela Munro sitting calmly, hands visible, voice composed. No aggression, no sudden movement. And yet, a gun was drawn, a shot was fired, blood spilled. By morning, her name was everywhere. Colonel Angela Munro, full-bird colonel, decorated war hero, survivor of 3 combat deployments. Shot in her own neighborhood, unarmed, in broad daylight. The headlines multiplied. Police shoot Army colonel in traffic stop gone wrong. Black military officer hospitalized after routine pullover. Turns violent national hero bleeds on U.S. street while wearing Army sweatshirt. News vans circled the hospital like hawks. Protesters gathered with signs reading "She fought for this country." Who fought for her? The mayor issued a statement by noon. "We are horrified. We are investigating. We are cooperating fully." The police department placed the officer on immediate administrative leave, but the damage, both literal and symbolic, was already done. Across the country, veterans groups voiced outrage. "How can a woman with 22 years of service be mistaken for a threat?" one retired general asked on national television. "What does that say about the rest of us?" Celebrities tweeted in support. Lawmakers called for action. Students staged walkouts. In her hospital room, Angela slowly opened her eyes, the beep of monitors soft and steady around her. Her sister sat beside her, holding her hand. Her leg was bandaged tightly. She couldn't sit up yet, couldn't walk, but she was alive. The doctor entered gently, his voice low. "You made it, Colonel. You're going to recover." Angela blinked once, then whispered, "Good." She wasn't done yet, because this wasn't just her story anymore. It had become a national reckoning. 3 days passed. Angela Monroe remained in her hospital bed, recovering from surgery, surrounded by armed guards and privacy screens. Not because she was a threat, but because the media frenzy outside had turned explosive. Reporters camped outside the hospital 24/7. Protesters gathered by the hundreds. People lit candles, wrote messages of support in chalk on the sidewalks. Veterans in full dress uniforms stood silently, saluting her window. Still, Angela hadn't spoken publicly. Not a word to reporters, not a statement to the press. The only words she'd spoken were to her sister, her doctor, and to herself, over and over again, greater than "Why didn't the badge recognize my dog tags?" It wasn't just pain she felt, it was betrayal. She had spent 2 decades earning the respect of generals, allies, and enemies. But back home, none of that mattered when she reached for her ID as a black woman at a traffic stop. The public waited, watching every update like a live drama. News anchors speculated, guests debated, and social media buzzed with anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. Then came the press conference. The hospital allowed 1 camera crew and a limited group of journalists. Angela was wheeled out slowly, still in her hospital gown, the IV pole trailing behind her. Her leg was elevated, her posture straight despite the pain. She looked into the cameras with tired but unwavering eyes. Then she spoke. "Greater than I did everything I was taught to do. I followed every instruction. I was calm. I complied. And I still got shot. Not for what I did, but for who I am." A hush fell over the room. Reporters stopped typing. Everyone leaned in. "Greater than I'm not here because I outranked a bullet," she said. "I'm here because I got lucky, but luck shouldn't decide who gets to go home, especially not in the country I fought for." The room erupted in silence, not applause, not outrage, just raw collective shame. Angela didn't flinch, because this time they were finally listening. Angela Monroe had survived the bullet. Now she was preparing for something even harder, surviving the attention. Her press conference made headlines around the world. Her quote, "I'm not here because I outranked a bullet. I'm here because I got lucky," was replayed across television, radio, and social media feeds. It became a rallying cry. People wore it on t-shirts, artists painted murals. A nation stirred. But Angela wasn't interested in fame, she was interested in change. In the weeks that followed, she declined talk show interviews. She refused to sign a book deal. Instead, she met quietly with lawmakers, civil rights attorneys, and military leaders behind closed doors. She wasn't just angry, she was strategic. She knew her story wasn't just personal. It was political, systemic, and deeply American. Greater than if someone like me, high-ranking, trained, calm, and unarmed, can still be viewed as a threat, she told a group of senators in Washington. What chance does a teacher have? A teenager? A single mom driving home from work? Her voice echoed through Senate hearings on police accountability. She testified with clarity and courage, speaking not from rage, but from reason. Her presence was undeniable, not just as a victim, but as a leader with lived authority. Meanwhile, the officer who shot her remained under investigation. The footage left little room for defense. His department, once tight-lipped, now faced mounting pressure. Advocacy groups demanded action, not just disciplinary measures, but reform. Angela worked quietly but persistently. She spoke at schools and police academies. She helped develop new training programs focused on de-escalation and implicit bias. She called for national standards, body cam transparency, and crisis response alternatives. And every time she stepped onto a stage, she carried a message larger than herself, greater than respect shouldn't depend on rank, and safety shouldn't depend on luck. She wasn't just back home now. She was on a new front line, fighting for those without armor, rank, or recognition. Angela Munro walked with a limp now. Doctors said it might take months before she'd fully regain her strength. The bullet had torn muscle and tissue, narrowly missing her femoral artery. But to Angela, the physical pain wasn't the worst part. The real scar, the one that kept her up at night, was invisible. "Greater than I never thought I'd feel safer in a war zone than in my own neighborhood," she said quietly to a group of high school students during a community forum. She didn't wear her uniform anymore. Instead, she wore regular clothes, blending into the crowd, just like she did the day she was shot. It was a reminder, a warning, a symbol. The speaking invitations poured in. Colleges, police departments, military installations, even a televised town hall on national policy. Angela didn't turn them down. She used every microphone, every camera, every room to push one message: greater than training can't just be about weapons. It must be about humanity. The public had embraced her, but she didn't let praise distract her. She hadn't set out to become a symbol. She had no interest in fame. What she wanted was justice. Not just for herself, but for every person who didn't get a second chance. Every life lost before an explanation could be given. Meanwhile, the officer who shot her was suspended indefinitely. His trial loomed, and the footage would be used as key evidence. Angela stayed out of the proceedings, but she made her expectations clear. "Greater than I don't want revenge," she told the media. "I want accountability." Behind the scenes, legislative bills inspired by her case gained traction. One proposed mandatory national standards for police conduct during traffic stops. Another required officers to undergo recurring racial bias training. Angela's story had sparked a movement. But for her, it wasn't a movement, it was a mission. And missions, she knew, don't end with applause. They end with change. It began with sirens. It ended with a speech that would echo across generations. Months had passed since the day Colonel Angela Munro was shot. She had healed, slowly, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And now, on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, she stood beneath a grey sky, facing a crowd that stretched as far as the eye could see. Veterans, mothers, students, officers, survivors. Some held signs, others held silence. But all stood united. Angela adjusted the microphone. Her cane stood beside her, unused. "Greater than I'm not here today as a colonel," she began. "I'm here as a citizen, as a daughter, as someone who was nearly killed for being the wrong color in the right country." The crowd listened, not blinking. "Greater than I led soldiers in war. I taught them how to stay calm under fire. But nothing prepared me for being treated like an enemy at home. Nothing prepared me to bleed out 5 blocks from my front door while wearing a sweatshirt that said, 'Army Strong.'" Her voice didn't shake. It carried. "Greater than this isn't just about me. This is about every person who gets profiled before they're greeted, threatened before they're heard, shot before they're seen." A pause. "Greater than the bullet didn't ask for ID. It didn't check for rank. It didn't care that I served. And that's the problem." Then she lifted her tags. They gleamed in the overcast light. Dog tags once worn proudly in combat, now symbols of a deeper fight at home. Greater than respect should not depend on a title, and justice should never depend on luck. I got lucky. Others didn't. Cheers erupted. But Angela didn't smile. She nodded once, like a soldier acknowledging a mission not yet complete. "Greater than I'll keep fighting. Not because I wear a uniform, but because I remember what it felt like to lie on that pavement, bleeding, unheard, unseen. And I won't stop until no one else has to." And with that, she stepped back. The applause rose like thunder, not just for her survival, but for her purpose. And her story, etched in pain, power, and perseverance, became part of America's history forever. "I'm not here because I outranked a bullet," she said. "I'm here because I got lucky. But luck should never decide who gets to go home." Her story became more than a headline. It became a warning and a revolution.